Hey, this is Gretchen, and I am here today on Gretchen's Guidance. I want to wish you lots of love and blessings today. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And we are working on day 10 today. Yesterday was day 9. It was about Moses's 5 excuses. Today we are working on day 10. And we're going to talk about Moses's blessings that he got because he listened to God. Now, if you want to turn your closed captioning on this video, you can just go up to the top of the video and press CC, because even myself, I go back and I listen to my videos just to listen to them and to make sure they make sense and all of those things. And I can't understand myself sometimes. And I'm like, what did I say? And so I know if I can't understand myself, then I'm just so Southern, and there's some words that I say too quick. There's other ones that I draw out. But there is that option on the videos. I did put that in the settings where you can click on the closed caption, so you can also read what I'm saying as well as hear what I'm saying if you're struggling with the southernness of my talk. This is going to really help you on your purpose journey, because some of you might be in the stage of Moses where you're feeling like you know what you need to do. You feel like you're being told what to do. You're getting signs from God. You're hearing Him. If you're spending that quiet time with Him, which is kind of strange. My devotion was actually about that, about how if you don't spend quiet time with God, then you're not going to get that wisdom throughout your day. That was my devotional today. And I was like, oh my gosh, see, I know it's coming from God because I feel that. And then I also saw someone else had wrote it in their devotional for us to read today. So that was very inspiring. So maybe you're like Moses, where you're knowing what you need to do, but you're stuck, right? You're stuck. I heard about a lady the other day who had written a novel, right? And she had actually gotten an offer from a book company after she wrote the novel, but she was too scared to publish it. She was too scared to let go of it, to do anything with it. And for 20 years, this book has been sitting on her desk. 20 years. Okay, so she's finally found the encouragement to go and publish it, and to, of course, the book offer is probably now long gone since it was 20 years ago, but she was talking because she's like, I'm going to go do it. So she was stuck for 20 years. So it happens, So maybe you're like Moses and you're stuck and you're coming up with excuses of why you don't need to do this. And I know that the Bible is old, but just for my life, and I'm not a preacher, I don't work at a church. I just basically read the Bible, I study it, I take notes, and I listen to what God tells me to do from what I read it. But I'm no expert whatsoever, but I am just sharing with you what works in my life, and some of you might do the same exact thing as I am, and that gives me wisdom, and that gets me to know where I go next. But the Bible is very old, and I know that it doesn't have cell phones in there. It doesn't talk about cell phones in the Bible, and that is such a huge part of our world. So why in the world, how can it relate to us today? Well, it does talk about cell phones in the Bible, because it says that we should not have false gods. We shouldn't have idols. And I know it sounds silly, but think about how much time people spend on their phones. Phones for a lot of people are idols, and they're distracting them from the good things in life. And so I feel like the Bible still speaks to us today, and it is my greatest source for wisdom. Not only is it alive, which I've talked about before, how I can read the Bible and it'll actually speak to me as I'm reading it. So not only is it alive when I read it, but you know, it also has a lot of wisdom. And if you take the stories and you really look at what God is trying to say in the stories, it still applies to today, and it has answers for us. It's not just the Bible is not going to give us answers. We have to, there's an active part in it too, right? We read the Bible, but the active part is listening and having that relationship with God. And those things come together and tell you what to do next. All right, so Moses decides to listen to God. He decides to go to Egypt. He decides to confront Pharaoh. And let's just talk about what God did for Moses doing that, how he blessed Moses, and how amazing things happen. And I am one of these where I believe these things really happened. I don't read the Bible and think it's a made-up story or it's pretend. I think if it's written in the Bible, it really happened. Even if it sounds unbelievable, that's just my faith. I believe that this is something that really happened a long time ago. All right, so let's jump on in. All right, so Moses, he and God had a lot of conversations, and he said, "I'll go." And so basically, God told Moses that if you go to Egypt, the water from the Nile will turn into blood. The staff will perform signs. So Moses went to Egypt with a staff, and he used that staff. It was kind of like his power. He used that staff while he was interacting with Pharaoh to try to get his people let go. So God also said that the staff will perform signs. Moses took his wife and he took his sons to Egypt when he traveled to Egypt. They all went as a family. So he went to Pharaoh and he said, let my people go. And of course, Pharaoh said, that's not going to happen. And because, what would Pharaoh be without the people? They were pretty much like his slaves. They worked all day. He didn't really pay them. They basically, if it weren't for them, then there would be no Pharaoh. And his power, but Pharaoh didn't see it that way. So he didn't want to let that situation up because it was so much benefit for him, but really no benefit to the people under him. But everyone was brainwashed, like what happens with evil leaders. So God told Moses, take these people out into the wilderness for 3 days. Moses is the people that he came to retrieve. And he knew that if he got them out into the wilderness for 3 days, they would hear the voice of God, and they would, if they spent that solitude away from Pharaoh, because a lot of times that's what we have to do. We have to remove ourselves from the problem that we're in so that we can look back and we can say, oh my goodness, how was I doing that? Like, how was I living in that way? As when you step out and you look back and you remove yourself from the problem, however hard that may be, then you'll realize, I should have done this a long time ago. God did not design for me to live this way. So he wants the people to go out into the wilderness so that they will have that wisdom and they can hear God. That didn't work. And then it ended up, where Pharaoh beat the Israelite leaders. Pharaoh said that he wanted them to work harder. So what he allowed them to go into the wilderness for a little while, but he also made them work so hard for them to get confused, to not hear God's word. So Moses said, okay, well, now you'll see I will see what I will do to Pharaoh. So Moses went to speak to Pharaoh, and the Israelites did not listen to Moses. So when he went to speak to Pharaoh, he basically told Pharaoh that God had told him that there was going to be a plague of frogs. So since, Moses went and the first thing he did was he took his staff and he took the water and he turned it into blood, and, showed signs to Pharaoh. Well, that none of that did anything for Pharaoh. So, when we don't listen to God, God's voice gets louder. Okay, so this is how it got louder with Pharaoh. So Moses said, well, God told me that if you don't release my people, then there will be a plague of frogs on Egypt. And so there was a plague, and in the Bible it says that there were frogs all over. There were the frogs in people's bed. There were frogs all over the floor. There were frogs everywhere. Okay, and so then Pharaoh said, okay, Moses, please kill the frogs, and then I will let your people go. So Moses killed all the frogs, but then Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he still didn't let the people go. So he was kind of just messing around with Moses. Or maybe he was having little thoughts of doing what was right, and then he became afraid of doing what was right. So then after that, God told Moses that he was going to have a dust of gnats, to let Pharaoh know that there would be a dust of gnats coming. So Moses told Pharaoh that there would be gnats, and if he didn't let people go. So, of course, Pharaoh says, well, or the gnats, Pharaoh says no, so then the gnats appear. And I guess there were like gnats everywhere. Like you couldn't even see. There were so many gnats. It was almost like darkness had filled the land and you couldn't see. And there were some magicians that Pharaoh had that would kind of fight against Moses. And at this point, this is where the magicians could not do the same thing as Moses. This is where their power kind of stopped. But the magicians were a distraction for a while with Pharaoh and Moses trying to get the people. But at this point, they lost their power. Because no one's going to be as powerful as God's power. They're going to try, but they're going to eventually lose power. So next was the swarm of flies, and there were flies everywhere, just like the gnats. You couldn't see. They swarmed. They were loud. They were in people's houses, just everywhere. You couldn't get away from the flies. So the same thing happened, and Pharaoh said, please kill the flies, and then I'll let your people go. So Moses killed the flies, and then still he didn't let the people go. And Moses also, eventually they went on the 3-day journey in the wilderness, and Moses prayed and prayed, but the people still would not let, or Pharaoh still would not let the people go. And I know I keep repeating this, but this is kind of like our life. We do the same things over and over again, just like Pharaoh. So then the story goes on to where Moses says, okay, so if you don't let us go, Pharaoh, if you don't let my people go, then God will bring a plague on your livestock. And so, of course, the same thing again. Pharaoh says, no, I'm not letting your people go. So all of the livestock of the Egyptians died. None of the livestock of the Israelites died. So that was another sign from God. So he did kill all of the livestock of Pharaoh's livestock, but he did not kill the Israelites' livestock. So you've got all of this dead livestock in Egypt. And so Pharaoh got word that the livestock in Israel, they were fine, right? So Pharaoh was like, how is your livestock still alive and mine is all dead? And so that got Pharaoh's attention even more. But same thing, he didn't let the people go, right? And God hardened his heart, and we're back to another round of this. So then he said, so then the next thing that happened was God put boils on all the people. They had like skin diseases, you know, almost like they had been burnt. And then, you know, God, you know, Moses asked God to stop that. And each time, you know, he was using his staff, and he asked God to stop that. So he healed the people's skin. Same thing. The people were still in Egypt. And then God said, you know what? I'm going to send the worst storm you have ever seen. So Moses took his staff and pointed it to the clouds, and the worst hail you've ever seen. If you didn't seek shelter, then you would die. And there were many people that didn't believe the storm, so they were out in the fields working, and they actually died because the storm did come, and it killed a lot of people. So then Pharaoh said Moses took his staff and he stopped the storm. Pharaoh said he you know, wasn't going to let the people go. And then Moses and God had a conversation in Exodus 10 where God told Moses to tell his grandchildren and children about God. And they kind of made promises with each other, and then that let Moses know that God was still with them, and they were going to get this done. But I can tell you what, if I was Moses, I'd be out of there. I'd be like, this isn't working. I give up. But that's why these stories are in the Bible. You just got to keep going. So then, of course, there was the plague of locusts. I think that's a really popular one that people talk about. And they I guess there were so many locusts that even the floors were black. They were covered everywhere. So people would look down at their floor, and you couldn't even see. It was completely covered in locusts. The officials, Pharaoh's officials, were like, you need to listen to Moses. This is out of control. Like, everything is happening that he's saying is going to happen, and it is time for you to listen to Moses, and we've got to stop this. Well, of course, you know, Pharaoh is still he's a very evil man, I guess, and so he wouldn't listen to his officials either. So now it's pretty much, it's kind of interesting. So now it's Moses and the officials are now believing Moses. So now Pharaoh's kind of getting over here by himself, and everyone else is kind of conforming to Moses and realizing that Moses is the one that they need to listen to. So that's interesting, because I see that a lot happening in life too. Sometimes you're in situations where people say things about you that aren't true, or various other things, and the truth over time always comes out. And so here the truth is starting to come out. So Pharaoh accused Moses. Now, when his officials started to believe Moses, Pharaoh accused Moses of being evil and started telling lies about him to try to get the officials to be back on his side. So that's also very interesting too. So then an east wind blew with a plague of locusts, and I always think it's very interesting how it's a lot of times in the Bible, it's an east wind. And, you know, here in America, we have so many westerly winds. That's kind of like the front that controls the weather, the wind that blows from the west to the east. But so locusts made the ground black. Nothing was green. They ate everything. They ate the leaves off the trees. And then the west wind came and killed the locust. So then God brought darkness for 3 days. Another thing, just like the livestock died in Egypt, but it was fine in Israel, same thing. That it was dark for 3 days in Egypt, but not in Israel. So that's another thing too. Pharaoh's like, well, why is it dark here and it's light over there? Pharaoh still would not let the people go. So very, very evil man. Okay. So then finally Moses told Pharaoh that every firstborn male would be killed if he did not let the people go. And so that did happen. Pharaoh said, okay, do it, bring it on. And all of the, all of the Egyptians' firstborn children were killed. So finally, Pharaoh let the people go. And it was a long, excruciating battle. And I love how Moses did not give up. I love how Moses talked to God. He listened to God. He didn't question him. He was at that point where he got over his excuses and he was ready to do it. And 6,000 people left to go to Israel. Now, when they first got out of Egypt, there was the Red Sea. And so they got out of Egypt, and Pharaoh and his army, because Pharaoh let him go, and then he was like, no, I want him back, right? Like, I just can't do it. I can't do it. He wasn't strong enough to do it because he was evil. And so they left to go back to Israel, and the Red Sea was there. And so Pharaoh and his army was like, ha, we're going to get you. What you going to do about that Red Sea? And so here comes Pharaoh. I can just picture it in my mind, and this is the way it's described in the Bible. You've got all these people around the sea trying to escape, and Pharaoh and his army are coming to get them, and they're scared, and they're looking at Moses like, I don't think we should have listened to you. I think this was a bad idea. Maybe we should just go back. But guess what? Moses took his staff and he parted the Red Sea. They got out, right? And then the sea came back right after they went through and took all of Pharaoh's army and drowned them and buried them in the sea. And so they escaped. And so I just can't even imagine how strong people's faith were because of Moses and him listening to God and them seeing God at work. And so I feel like, that's a huge thing for our purpose journey, that once you get to that point where you're like, okay, I got it, I'm going, you're going to be going. When you get out of your own way and you go, God is going to be with you like Moses. He's not going to leave you. He's going to go with you. If you want to part the Red Sea, and you ask him for help, he'll do it. And so I think it's just a wonderful faith story that is real and alive. And I think just like Moses went and did it the hard way, so will God do that for you, because you're God's child, just like Moses is. And so he will treat you the same way if you live in faith and you step out. And, as you know, I've kind of stepped out in faith and I'm trying to figure things out. And I cannot even tell you like how much better I feel emotionally. It's like before, it's like my brain was like in a box, or, I felt like I was in a box. And even though I don't have as much aligned up as I did before, it's like I feel like I'm free. I feel like I'm out of a box. So if you're kind of like that, where you feel like you're in a box and you want to get out of that box, then this is definitely the way to do it, is just to seeking God and listening to what he tells you to do and doing it. And you will be rewarded. And I don't expect monetary rewards. I just expect freedom, peace, and I can't even tell you. I don't know where I'm going yet, but just me stepping out and starting on my journey to follow God, the freedom and the peace that I feel is worth everything. Okay, so I hope this spoke to you today. I hope this helped you. I hope this is going to encourage some of you to get out of your box and to seek a little bit of peace, a little bit of freedom. And like I said, I'm going through these things, and I want to share it with you. I was talking to my daughter this morning, and she said, I mean, why are you making those YouTube videos? I mean, it's just da 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 da, you know. And I told her, I said, I'm just making it to share good news to people, you know, to tell people about Jesus and to tell about how he's working in my life. And so if I do that, I'm just trying to make God proud. You know, it says in the Bible that he is my father, that I am adopted by God. And even though I don't have a living dad anymore, you know, God is my father. And so I try to make him proud, just like I tried to make my dad proud when he was alive. And so if I'm doing that, I trust him to bless me and to give me wisdom and guidance and peace. And so, I think it's really important. And so I hope the same will happen in your life. If not, I hope it's happening, you know, and you're living it and you're hearing this and you're like, yeah, I did it. You know, Gretchen, keep going. I did it. It's good. You know, so, but anyway, so I really enjoyed speaking with you today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. And of course, stir up a little love. Stir up that love. There's so much hate. Stir up the love. And so what we're going to be talking about on the next video is having a cheerleader. It's really important to have a cheerleader on this journey. And I have 3 cheerleaders that I want to talk about and how they have really helped me, because of course, we don't necessarily need cheerleaders. We have God, and we can do it with him, but it's a lot better if you do it with God and have a cheerleader, because God designed us to be with each other here on earth. Okay, so have a great rest of your day, and I will see you real soon. Bye-bye.